Thank you everyone for joining this CCN Solutions sponsored webinar, Restarting Enterprise Architecture in the Age of Digital Transformation, presented by Jason Bloomberg from Intellex and Michael Fulton from CCNC Solutions. We'll get started with a little bit of discussion from Jason on his perspective on digital transformation and the topic of restarting enterprise architecture. Then we'll transition to a discussion from myself, Mike Fulton, on the CCNC perspective on the topic, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. If you do have questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the question bank. We will answer those questions at the end of the discussion. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jason.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. So a bit about me, if you could change the slide. And let's see if we can change the slide. There we are, a bit about me. I'm president of Intellex. We're an industry Okay, hopefully we're working now. I'm president of industry analyst from Intellex. We're focused on agile digital transformation, and I will be defining what I mean by that in just a few minutes. I also write for Forbes. I have several contributed blogs and a biweekly newsletter, The Cortex. You should all sign up for that. And my latest book is now a few years old, Agile Architecture Revolution, but stay tuned for my new book coming out in 2017. So I'd like to start basically with today's agile imperative in the enterprise. Now I use this word agile a lot, and when I introduce it, I need to point out that I'm not really talking about agile with a capital A, that is agile in the context of the Agile Manifesto. We're talking more broadly about business agility and really understanding what it takes to help organizations deal better with change overall. So it's a very disruptive business environment. Digital transformation is very disruptive to organizations, and we need to be more innovative and resilient in the face of such disruptions. And that's what we really mean, broadly speaking, by the Agile imperative. Okay, so next slide. I define business agility as the ability to respond to change in the business environment, as well as leveraging change for competitive advantage. So there's two sides to this definition. There is the more tactical side. You need to be able to respond quickly and efficiently to change. That is responsiveness, which is the tactical value. You know, some sort of business change takes place and you want to be able to respond in order to achieve the goals of your business. And then resilience, which is responsiveness to adverse events, so dealing with risk, dealing with adverse events, whether they are technical events, you know, downtime or other, you know, hacks or other issues, or business events, you know, competitive changes, etc. You want to be able to bounce back from those, and that's a key part of agility as well. Then the second half of the definition, leveraging change for competitive advantage, that is where innovativeness falls, and that is where an organization gets strategic value. So you want to be able to innovate, either leverage disruption that is already in the marketplace to drive new products and services, or you want to introduce change if necessary. So if we roll all this up, the core business goal is what I call agile digital transformation, and just a little sneak peek, that will be the title of my new book as well. So it all fits together. And so we have these three words, and it's important to really understand what we mean by digital transformation, and then what it means to do it in an agile way. So next up, what is digital? So next slide, what is digital? This word digital, now, if somebody had asked me whether to use this word digital or not for what we're doing today, I would have said, you know, no way. It's an old word, right? Digital came on the scene back in the 1940s when the first digital computers started replacing the analog computers of the day. There's what I think that's ENIAC or UNIVAC, one of those with the vacuum tubes. That was one of the first digital computers. So the term has been around for 70 years, but we're using it in a different way today. We don't just mean using ones and zeros. What we mean really is that customer preferences and behavior are driving enterprise technology choices more than ever before. So If you think about digital, people usually first think about mobile telephony, think about using smartphones, and smartphones and other mobile technologies are a major part of the digital story today, but that is because customers want to use them. And when we say customers, we mean the end customer as well as employees, partners, anybody who is driving technology decisions. That is now becoming the digital context. So the range of technology touchpoints is exploding: smartphones, tablets, smart televisions, and then the Internet of Things as well. And all of these are now driving the digital transformations in organizations. So when we say the word transformation, what we really are talking about is organizational change. So in order to deal with these new competitive pressures, these new customer preferences and behaviors, we must change our organization. So it's not simply enough to roll out digital versions of our existing products. We can't just take our web page and make it responsive for mobile and call it a day. What we really need to do is transform our whole organization. This is a end-to-end transformation in order to support these changing customer demands. So in the enterprise context as well, it has to be end-to-end. It's not just a front office customer-facing change. In order to support the customer demands on that front end, it requires all of the pieces to fit into this into the puzzle. So everything from the stuff in the middle, in the cloud, on-premise, middleware, third-party services, to the back-end systems of record. All of them are part of digital transformation. And it's organizational primarily as well as technological. Of course, when we start dealing about organizational as well as technological change, that's why we need to start talking about enterprise architecture, because we need to have an overall picture that ties those two together. Okay, so next slide. When we put the words digital and transformation together, we see that the customer pressures are driving both technological and organizational change in companies of small and large. So enterprises, especially the large organizations, have to rethink so many different things. Where you have to rethink how you're serving customers. You have to rethink the role IT is playing, both in terms of serving your end customer as well as serving employees and other parts of your organization. You have to rethink organizationally how you're building and managing teams. Traditional hierarchical organizational structures are not flexible enough to respond to the agility requirements that digital transformation is driving. And then innovation, of course, being able to leverage change, leverage disruption for competitive advantage is the key to strategic differentiation. In other words, it's the key to business success. So even for the very largest organizations, digital transformation is threatening their very existence, right? Just because you may think you're too big to fail, you're not. Every organization is subject to disruptive, transformative forces, and being able to innovate in the face of changing customer demand, customer preferences, is essential basically for the survival of the organization. So I mentioned front to back, end to end, as a part of the digital story. This is a very fundamental part of the overall understanding, and when you're thinking about what enterprise architects can bring to the table, this is part of the story, right? Because what EAs are especially suited for doing is making sure that the big picture of how everything fits together is brought to various audiences. So in the digital context, you as an EA may be talking one day to the marketing team, and they're thinking about interactions with customers, but they don't understand all the back-end technology. Or you may be talking to the user experience team, building mobile apps and websites and thinking about it from that perspective. The next day you may be talking to a traditional IT organization, maybe the middleware group or the folks in charge of cloud computing or the DevOps group, which is driving application development and operations. All of these are part of this end-to-end story. But that's not the whole story, right? There are other dimensions as well. The second one is breadth of interaction. One of the key aspects of the modern digital world is that typically companies do not stand alone. Right? If you look, for example, at a modern enterprise website, yes, you'll have the website itself with the pages that you may be serving up from your own servers or more likely than not from some sort of cloud environment. But if you look at that page, you'll have a number of plugins and widgets and tags and other third-party elements, everything from Google Analytics to your dynamic advertising, and the list goes on and on. You may have 60 or 70 of these within a single web page. Well, this is an example of the breadth of interaction, right? We have essentially this is an example of the depth of community, a broad ecosystem of vendors and services that are fitting into this digital story. The breadth of interaction is the diversity of customer touch points, right? A customer is not just going to be using a computer. They may be using a mobile phone. They may be using a point of sale system, maybe interacting with a sales representative. They may be walking by a beacon in the customer, retail environment, or any number of other touch points. So we have these three dimensions, front to back, from the customer to the back-end systems of record, breadth of interaction across the various touch points that customers are using to interact with customers, and then the depth of community, all the different partners in the ecosystem that are providing either parts of your website or parts of the cloud environment or the back-end systems. You may be leveraging SaaS applications as part of your fundamental offering, and all of that is part of your depth of community. Okay, next slide. When we talk about digital transformation, well, you might ask then, what are we transforming? Obviously, we need to transform the customer experience. Why? Because customers are demanding that, right? Customers are using their phones more than ever more, and they're expanding the range of touch points, so they are demanding that companies change, and that is a key part of digital transformation. Of course, we need to change our technology just to keep up. An important part of the story, but as any EA will tell you, only a part of the story. Then we also have the internal organization. As I said, digital transformation is primarily an organizational change. So the reality is we're changing all of these, right? So from my perspective, digital transformation is actually an aspect or a way of looking at a next generation approach to business transformation. Now, I know, having seen Mike's slides coming up in just a short time, he sees digital transformation as a component of business transformation, and that's really a question of semantics. From my perspective, though, when I talk about digital transformation, I'm talking about the whole enchilada, right? The end-to-end big picture of the changes organizations are facing. Of course, business transformation is not a new concept. Organizations have been transforming since business was invented back in the Iron Age, but today we're driving it with these digital priorities, and so I'm rethinking business transformation in the context of digital transformation. Okay, so where do you start? Where do you start with digital transformation, especially as an enterprise architecture team? Well, the way I like to think about this is that there's work to do before you can even get to the starting line. I know techies love counting, starting from zero, and that fits in here very well, because essentially, in order to get started with strategic digital transformation efforts, there's some messes you need to clean up. Now, which messes your organization faces will be unique to your situation. But having worked with many different enterprises around the world, different industries, different countries, I can guarantee you that every single one of them is completely screwed up. That's just part of what it means to be a large organization. So whether it's hierarchical issues or decision-making issues or technology spaghetti or other issues, there's all sorts of challenges that just limit an organization's ability to be efficient and achieve the goals of their organization. So one of the first things that the EA team should focus on is just getting to the point that they can begin their digital transformation effort, which means understanding the challenges that are in their way and moving forward sufficiently in order to make progress. Now, you can't necessarily, generally, you cannot clean up all your messes in order to get started. That would take you forever, and a lot of people, sort of get overly optimistic as to how much progress they can make, and they get bogged down in those messes, and then they don't make sufficient progress. So don't fall into that trap. You don't have to solve all your problems in order to move to the next step, but you do need to get a handle on them, and you need to tackle them iteratively. So fix what's broken, starting with the highest priority. You don't have to fix everything, but you need to understand what is the highest priority. And if you struggle to answer that question, circle around to the customer. Right? What does the customer think is the highest priority? And that will drive how you solve those messes. So I talked about innovation and dealing with disruption, both leveraging it as well as introducing disruption into the marketplace. And that is a fundamental part of what every organization needs to do. But it is not the whole story, right? If you think about what executives are focused on day to day, they're more likely to be focused on optimization activities than they are innovation activities. That is, they're dealing with cost savings, they're dealing with efficiency, they're taking whatever it is they're doing and they're trying to improve their key performance indicators, so improve their key metrics, improve profitability, cut costs as best we can. And they'll tackle that over and over again in order to optimize to those particular figures. And it's no wonder, right? This improves your profitability, improves shareholder value, and it's how executives make their bonuses, right? The executives have targets for this indicator or that, and if they can achieve those targets, they get their bonuses. So obviously, they are putting their efforts into optimizing those parts of the business. That's a part of what it means to run a large organization. But if all you're doing is optimizing, then you're not going to be able to deal well with disruption. So companies who optimize to an excessive extent will fail to be innovative, and they will end up losing out to more innovative companies. So this is a paradox, right? You can't simply go into an organization and say, we're going to make you more profitable, we're going to cut your costs, we're going to streamline, we're going to give us your key performance indicators, and we are going to maximize all of these numbers. Because if that's all you do, that's a recipe for failure. So it's a bit paradoxical, because there has to be a level of disruption that drives innovation. So you have to balance this. How do you achieve that balance? That's part of the challenge of enterprise architecture. So one of the key tools in the enterprise architect's tool belt to achieve this balance between optimization and disruptive-driven innovation is self-organization. So I mentioned that one of the challenges that many large organizations, virtually all of them, face is rigid hierarchical organizational structures. Now, hierarchical organizational structures where managers have direct reports and they communicate the strategies and goals at that particular level, and then each level does the same for the levels below. It's no wonder we have those, right? Because they scale reasonably well, right? We can start with a 100-person company and grow to 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million-person organization, and hierarchies will still continue to work, right? So they are scalable. So it's no wonder that the hierarchical approach has been the default approach for growing large organizations. The challenge is, though, well, there are many challenges, but some of the challenges is because we're now siloing the organization, we are optimizing, but we're not dealing well with disruption. Right? So if we're looking at taking our organizations and say, well, we want to be more innovative, we need to deal well with change better. One of the things that we need to do is rethink how we organize the overall organization. And the key to doing that is self-organization. So building self-organizing teams who are able to drive innovation, drive creative disruption, and then we have to figure out how to expand that beyond the small team basis. Right? It's one thing to take 6 or 8 people and have them self-organize. It's quite another thing to expand that across a large organization. That, again, is now part of the challenge of the modern enterprise architect. So this is why I say that enterprise architecture shouldn't be city planning. And now this is something that Mike Fulton and I also disagree on, or at least have different perspectives on. Traditionally speaking, the city planning metaphor has been used to represent enterprise architecture for many years. If you think about what it takes to plan a city, yes, every building has to be planned in and of itself. But then if you think about the overall city, you have the various systems, the plumbing and the wiring and the streets and the zoning. And then you also have the organizational structures in terms of how cities make decisions and deal with change overall. And yes, cities are able to deal to some extent with change. But the problem that I see it with this metaphor for city planning for enterprise architecture is that if we plan a city and we get very, very good at planning the city, we may have a very well organized city, but it's going to be less agile. It's going to be less able to deal with unexpected disruptions. So what we really want to do when we're looking at a large organization is get the results we want, that is better innovativeness, dealing better with change, responding to customer demands that are part of our digital transformation initiative, even though we don't have a rigid organizational structure, right? How do we get the best results from an unplanned city, right? Most cities are unplanned, so we can't just simply say, well, let's just go ahead and plan them and that's going to fix them, right? That's not how you fix an unplanned city. We have to deal better with the fact that that we have a variety of disruptions in place, and we have to think about that and moving forward. So this gives a new role for the EA, next slide, where it's not simply thinking about frameworks and plans and roadmaps, right? That's sort of a traditional way that EAs think. They think in terms of graphical abstractions, of the boxes and lines way of thinking about enterprise architecture. What are the standards? What are the best approaches? What are the methodologies? What are the frameworks that we need to work from? Well, those are important tools, but we have roles on top of those tools. We're not throwing out the tools necessarily, but we're using them in a different way. So, for example, we need to leverage the data that we have. So it's a feedback-driven approach to balancing optimization and disruption. So leveraging data, what I mean by that is that you may focus on optimization and find you're not sufficiently innovative, so you have to get that information, feed that back into your approach, and deal better with disruption. Or it may work the other way. You may be overly dealing with disruption, and now you're losing track of some of your business metrics. So there has to be a balance there that you achieve through data-driven feedback loops. This is the key to achieving market-leading levels of innovation. If you look at very innovative organizations, say Apple Computer, they really understand how to innovate, but they're also a very large shareholder-focused organization who's very good at making profits as well, right? So you can make really good profits and you can be very innovative at the same time. And in fact, if you get innovation right, that will drive profits, right? It's not just about optimizing your key business metrics. So one of the bits of advice I suggest to enterprise architecture teams is reinvent yourself, right? Don't just think of yourself as architects. I mean, you know you're architects, and the people on your team know you're architects, but the word architect is everybody struggles with that, and those don't really know how these architects fit into the big picture. So instead, call yourself, I don't know, digital enablers. I mean, the terminology doesn't really matter. What terminology is a psychological tool to get people to understand what you're trying to tell them. So whatever terminology makes sense in the context of your organization. But one of the things I like to suggest is rethinking the EA team as the Center for Digital Enablement. So now you're essentially a set of resources for how to achieve the goals of your digital transformation initiative across the organization. So, and across the organization is the key here, right? Because you'll have UX people who know about UX, you'll have the marketing people who know about marketing, you'll have the DevOps people who know about development and operations at Velocity, and everybody has their specialties. But the EA has to be able to think about the end-to-end big picture and help coordinate people and establish common areas of communication so people understand one another. Then there's also the movement toward greater self-organization. How do you move from small self-organizing teams to self-organization on a larger scale? There's how do we take DevOps culture and extend it past development and operations? That is a fundamental role that the EAs can help with as well. And you want to become a competency center, but you don't want to be a gatekeeper. So you don't want to be a traditional center of excellence where people have to come to you for instructions how to do things, but rather you reaching out to them and helping to support self-service, helping to support innovation, helping to support the digital transformation efforts that the organization requires. And of course, this team, the Center for Digital Enablement, or CODE, a nice ironic name, that team should be self-organized as well. You don't assign people positions in that team and tell them what to do. Individuals essentially have to volunteer and figure out how they can contribute. Every Center for Digital Enablement will be different from one organization to the next. So, next slide to wrap up. Keep in mind, this is hard stuff. right? There is no shortcut. And this is part of the role of the EA as well, right? A lot of times people in the organization look for shortcuts. They try to say, well, there's, if only we got this tool, if only we got followed this newfangled management technique or newfangled methodology, then everything would be easy. Well, there's nothing easy about this, right? It's a difficult set of challenges. It involves the whole organization. There's many different moving parts. But remember that even though digital is a hot buzzword today, it's not really about digital in and of itself. It's not about technology. It's not about the smartphones. It's about the transformation. It's about organizational change in furtherance of long-term business goals, which are success of organizations in a dramatically dynamic business environment that is upending everybody in how they're doing business. Okay, so that's it for my talk. Just my final slide, the thank you slide. There's my name, my email address if you want to contact me. My Twitter handle is the eBizWizard, and if you want a copy of the slides, both my deck as well as Mike's, you can send an email right now. I know you've been twiddling on your phones. I know you've been twiddling on your phones during the webinar. Every one of you has been doing that. So there's no reason not to send an email right now to restart@intellex.com. That is an automated autoresponder. You'll get one and only one response email with a link to the slides on SlideShare, a link to how to sign up for our newsletter, and a few other things, but it's just the one email. We won't spam you, promise. And do that right now before you forget. And while you're doing that, I will introduce Mike Fulton from CC&C Solutions. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. Before we transition to my slides, I wanted to give everyone just a minute to ask Jason any questions that are top of mind, and then we'll have another chance for a Q&A here at the end of the presentation as well. Any hot questions for Jason that anyone would like to hit real quick?
Yeah, I can't see the questions, so Mike, you'll have to read them if any come up.
Yeah, we're not getting any on the question panel.
Yeah, we surprised the audience. We didn't tell them they'd be asking questions in the middle. So think about those questions. You'll have a chance at the end. Don't worry.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and jump into the next part of our presentation. So a lot of you that have joined today may not be familiar with CC&C Solutions. So as we're stepping into this conversation, I did want to do a brief introduction of myself and of CC&C. CC&C is a global enterprise architecture and IT internal transformation consulting and trading company. We're headquartered out of Sydney, Australia, but we're staffed all around the world. We really are very, very passionate about our mission, which is to help lead the development and the growth of enterprise architecture and IT capability for the individual, for the organization, for the industry. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We do that through the consulting work we do with organizations to help them stand up EA practices. We do that through the coaching and mentoring that we do for individuals. And we do that through our engagement with industry standards bodies like the Open Group, where we contribute to TOGAF and IT for IT and other standards. Personally, I am president of the CC&C Americas division. I've been in the IT industry for about 25 years now, and spent almost 20 of that at a Fortune 50 company. Spent close to 10 years as an enterprise architect at this point. And I am part of the global steering committee for IT, and I chair the Association of Enterprise Architects Ohio chapter. So very involved in the community of architects and IT professionals. Now, before we get into the meat of this, we promised a webinar about enterprise architecture and digital transformation. And I know that Jason spent a lot of his time talking digital, so I wanted to just make sure that we were all on the same page when we were talking enterprise architecture. So to start the conversation, what I wanted to make sure that we were clear on was what I mean when I talk about enterprise architecture. And so in order to kind of preface that conversation, as you can see here on our chart, we've got strategy and execution. Every single organization has both. Every organization needs to have both. And usually, in most organizations, strategy and execution, particularly in an IT organization, are done by different parts of the organization, different silos. That is something that tends to lead to a major disconnect. In fact, the bigger the organizations, the bigger the disconnect. At least that's been our experience at CCNC as we work with different companies around the world. The bigger the organization, the bigger the disconnect. And so it's important to understand when we talk about that, when we talk about this concept of digital transformation, what we're simply talking about is the idea that there is a new strategy for the organization that's really a little more customer focused. We're changing how we interact with our customers typically, and many times we're changing our business model in a way that we haven't historically done to be able to engage and interact with our customers and do things differently. That fundamentally is the core of what we talk about with digital, but we also talk about some other pieces. And specifically, one of the things that's commonly tied up with digital is this concept of agile. And when I think about agile, to me, what that implies is really a new way of executing for most organizations. We're getting closer to the end user, we're iterating much more quickly, and we're doing a little less planning and a little more action typically. But at the end of the day, agile, and again, I'm talking in general within IT organizations, but also within the business organizations. When we work in an agile manner and follow some of the agile thought processes and principles, we're still driving the execution process. And so we still have to have a way to bridge the gap, and that's what enterprise architecture is here for. Enterprise architecture really is all about bridging the gap. It's very easy for us to get off track and build cool stuff, but that stuff isn't necessarily going to align with our strategies or benefit our company. So we need to make sure that somebody is paying attention and trying to bring those things together. And enterprise architecture is really responsible for owning the development of the transformation plan for a company, and then aligning that plan within the enterprise. I think both of those pieces of that statement are critical to understand. EA owns the development of the transformation plan. We're putting the plan together. We've got lots of methods and techniques to try and do that, but it's also critically important and sometimes missed within EA organizations. It's critically important that we drive that and own that alignment of the plan within the organization. Without the alignment, then we will not execute against the transformation plan. And so we have to bring both pieces of those together. Now, as Jason highlighted earlier, it is a little bit of a tired metaphor to have this conversation about enterprise architecture equals city planning, but I think I fundamentally disagree with the fact that the two are not equal. In today's world, I think it's critically important that the enterprise architecture role includes that city planning role. We still need to have some element of planning. I think one of the things that goes into that conversation when people say we don't want to have city planning is an inherent assumption that more planning means less agility. And I don't think that's true. Fundamentally, I believe that it is very, very possible for us to plan for agility. I think that's an important piece of the planning process. I think that's an important piece of what we as enterprise architects need to bring to the table when we are working with our organizations. But at the same time, it's important for somebody to be taking that bigger picture look, to take that step back. When everyone in an organization is off moving as fast as they can in their individual silos, then we're going to have a mess. The enterprise architect being there to look at the bigger picture helps make sure that each specific piece of work is meeting the overall needs of the organization and aligning with the overall strategy of our organization. That's what holds everything together. Now, as I said on the last slide, I do think the city planning for IT is a part of enterprise architecture, and I think that work really comes into play in the first two stages of this CCNC model of enterprise architecture maturity that you see on screen. Some of you, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you may have read my article on this same topic. I believe that solution architecture and enterprise solution architecture are very much about setting up the guardrails and partnering with the project teams to develop designs that will fit with the overall strategies of the company. So I think that city planning piece is absolutely critical in this stage of evolution, this stage of maturity for an enterprise architecture organization. But when we start to evolve and to grow into the last two stages, the enterprise IT architecture and the enterprise architecture, now we're driving the transformations much beyond the individual projects. Now we're transforming our IT landscape, we're transforming the processes of the organization, and at the absolute highest levels of EA maturity, we're transforming the fundamental business models of our company. That's really where this concept of digital transformation is coming into play. When we're impacting, transforming the business model of the company, that's where it comes into play. Now, just a note for some of you that are well read within the industry, you'll note that a lot of people talk about business architecture as something that's standalone and different from enterprise architecture. I believe that to be a complete misnomer that is doing our industry a great disservice. Enterprise architecture in just about every model of or every framework of enterprise architecture that I've ever seen has always included an element of business architecture as part of it. In this particular evolution or maturity model for EA, business architecture really comes in very heavily in that enterprise IT architecture and the enterprise architecture piece. Two different perspectives of it. When we talk about enterprise IT architecture, really talking about transforming your IT landscape in the context of your business processes. And so it's really the enterprise architecture process is really subservient and really driven by business process change. When we're talking about that top level of this model, enterprise architecture, this is where your EA team is engaging with the senior leaders of your business organization and driving transformative business model change. And the IT landscape is just coming along for the ride. This is really not about changing and transforming IT. This is about changing and transforming the enterprise. And it really fits very well with this concept of digital transformation that we're talking about here today. Now, as Jason mentioned during his presentation, I do think about this idea of digital transformation, business transformation a little bit differently. We've got a little bit of a perspective on that here at CCNC. And the reason why is because, quite frankly, I think it's very ill-defined and not well talked to in the industry. And so we've put this model together to try and really talk to folks about what this is. And so we look at business transformation as being all-encompassing. Digital is a piece of that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But enterprise architecture has been driving a lot of business transformation in organizations for many years. And this idea of digital is really, for me, a shift in focus towards the customer more than anything else. So when we talk about this, we talk really about three key elements: digital, enterprise, and IT functional transformations that are going on. Digital transformation is primarily focused on those customer-facing areas of the model of the business and of the extended enterprise. This is where we're stepping outside of the walls of our organization, and we're making sure that we understand what our customer is looking for. Most of the time, this digital transformation implies a transformation of our enterprise's business model using information technology. When we're interacting with customers differently because of the ability to use mobile devices versus what we've been able to do historically. We're able to provide new capability to the customer than we ever were able to before. When we, as Jason was talking about earlier, he talked about a little bit about sensors and beacons in a grocery store, for example. That's a fundamental change of a business model. We're interacting with the customer differently in the store in a different way than we ever have before. We're changing how we do work, and that may, in fact, involve that customer transacting with us in a different way. And that is a key change to our business model. It may not be the money that the customer is paying us is where we're driving the most value for our organization anymore. We may be driving more economic value for our organization from the data that we capture from that customer. And so we may be changing the actual transaction between us and the customer through this process. That's all a discussion about digital transformation to me. Now, the next piece of this is when we look at bringing in enterprise transformation. Now, this is really where, as enterprise architects, we have historically played. It's primarily focused on getting work done inside an enterprise, primarily focused on transforming the business processes of an organization using information technology. This is where we make changes to product supply or the purchasing processes or the HR processes, the financial processes, all those things that as good enterprise architects we've been doing for years and years and years, optimizing and bringing in new technology, driving process change to get things done more effectively inside our four walls. Now, the third element of business transformation that I talked here is this idea of IT functional transformation. And the reason why I call that out is I think this is a tremendously important area for IT organizations to grapple with right now. With everything going on related to new ways of working like Agile and DevOps and Lean IT and all these new ways of working, coupled with things that are changing in how we work, how we do work, and what the work looks like, and who does the work. When we talk about Internet of Things, or we talk about big data, or we talk about cloud, and the service orientation that needs to be brought to the table, the lines being drawn in different places around who manages what. All those conversations are fundamentally driving a functional transformation within IT. And I think this is absolutely critical area for us to include in this transformation process, because the work that's being done in IT against IT is also leaking outside of the traditional IT organization. It's being done underneath the chief digital officer now. It's being done under the CMO or the sales officer. It's people are going out and buying the cloud with their credit card. There is still work that needs to happen to execute and support that from an IT perspective. And we still need to manage that regardless of whether that the management of that information technology is happening inside of the historical IT department or outside of it. And so this idea of IT functional transformation really is all about transforming the IT management processes that we have to work with on a day-to-day basis, many times again using and bringing information technology to bear to help us there too. So I think each of these transformations has historically been important to the picture, but when we do these transformations historically, we've also brought a lot of technology innovation to the table. So technology innovation absolutely has to be part of that. Obviously, we've mentioned the idea of beacons and sensors and Internet of Things and cloud and some of these things. These are all reasonably recent technology innovations that have enabled us to rethink what we're going to do with our transformations. And so without some of those technology innovations, the business transformation would have never been possible. But the technology innovation really is simply an enabler of the overall transformation. So we know our why. That's our business strategy. We know our what's. the three key elements of transformation that we've been talking about. Now we need to talk about is the how. And that how, in today's digital world, to me, enterprise architecture has to be the how. Enterprise architecture is the best method for delivering business transformation for the enterprise. As you recall from when we talked about the evolution of enterprise architecture in the last slide, we talked about solution architecture, which historically has had a heavy focus on technology innovation. We talked about enterprise solution architecture and enterprise IT architecture, which have historically really addressed enterprise and IT functional business transformations. And we also talked about enterprise architecture, that most mature and complete evolution of architecture for an enterprise, where we're impacting the business models of the company. That sure sounds like an approach or a technique to drive digital transformation to me. It's a perfect fit for leading and driving that digital transformation within our organizations. Now, we said we were talking about digital transformation, but we also said we were talking about restarting enterprise architecture in an era of digital transformation. So I want to hit on that a little bit. And before we hit on how we restart, I want to cover what's not working. Right, so we'll touch on, and you can probably see these three within your organizations. You may have other things in your organizations that are preventing EA from working in an era of digital transformation. But I want to focus on three. Those three today are going to be enterprise architecture has ended up as the gatekeepers of an organization. EA is perceived as slowing down organizations, and EA has struggled to really mature and evolve over time. So this first one, historically what we've seen is that enterprise architecture organizations have been looked to as the technical gatekeepers of the enterprise. It's largely coming from that project governance role that we play when we're talking about solution architecture or enterprise solution architecture. But to the project managers and the application developers in the organization, it feels like we're sweeping in, we're telling them what they did wrong, and then we're running away. So it's important for us as enterprise architects to really think about this differently. We need to set guardrails for teams to iterate inside of, but we need to be alongside them as partners. We need to make adjustments to our recommendations along the way as appropriate. We need to help the teams understand why the guardrails are in place. We need to help them understand what this is doing to help us deliver the success of the company overall. By partnering, that doesn't mean we need to be overly prescriptive with our plans. We can give the organization the flexibility it needs to be responsive and agile, but this tends to go against our nature. As enterprise architects, a large percentage of us have come up through the ranks of IT. We've been promoted to these positions because we're detail-oriented. We've done a fabulous job with our technical acumen, and that's what has gotten us to this place. And so to now turn around and say, we're not going to tell people everything that we know, or we're not going to tell people exactly how to do something and run the risk of them doing it wrong, that's hard for us. And so I think I really think it's important for us to take ourselves out of that gatekeeper role. Make sure that we give the organization, the project managers, the app dev team, the operations team, we give the organization room to figure it out for themselves, and we come alongside them and we partner with them as they need help in a collaborative fashion versus the traffic cop sort of a fashion. The next thing that has historically happened is that enterprise architecture has been perceived as slowing down the organization. Now, don't get me wrong, doing enterprise architecture right can take a long time, right? It is not easy work. And a lot of times, as we talked about on the last slide, our best enterprise architects are coming from a very detail-oriented engineering type of a background. So they want precision, they want accuracy, they want completeness, and they want details. But in today's world, the business can't wait for the complete picture. We need to make decisions with less than complete data. It's important for us as enterprise architects to understand the potential cost of delay. We need to know when good enough is good enough, and we need to make our decisions faster. We're not no longer in a place where we can make a decision and assume that it's going to transform a process or put in place a new system for the next 10 to 20 years. Today, we're lucky if we're going to get 10 to 20 months out of the processes and the systems that we're changing. So we need to incorporate that and include that in, that really changes the slope of the line when we talk about a cost of delay. So one of the ways that is important for EAs to understand to help drive speed is you want to limit your scope and take advantage of iteration. By iterating very quickly, we can apply agile approaches in thinking, but not necessarily obviously some of the same techniques, to our EA practice in smaller chunks, and we can move much more quickly. I think we still have to plan, as we talked about several times. We have to plan for the organization, but we need to plan for 12 to 18 months, not 3 to 5 years. So again, it's that shorter time horizon. All right, so the last comment about what went wrong with EA, I believe that we've not evolved with the times as a profession. So I think that we continue to struggle with people thinking that solution architecture equals enterprise architecture. I think we continue to struggle with people thinking that IT architecture equals enterprise architecture, and it doesn't. Enterprise architecture includes business information application technology architecture and all the things that go around that. And we struggle with the fact that some of these things just aren't resonating with people. And so how do we fix that? I think that's something we have to figure out as a profession. I think we also struggle with the fact that our most popular framework for enterprise architecture hasn't changed since 2009. Our second most popular, or our second most well-known framework for EA hasn't fundamentally changed since 2008. If you're not familiar with what those are, the most popular one's TOGAF. The second most popular one is the Zachman framework. Those aren't changing. Now, there's reasons they aren't changing. Zachman is fundamentally it's fairly foundational, and the ontology really still works and fits, and it's been in place for a long time, and that's fine. TOGAF fundamentally isn't changing. It fundamentally is changing, but it's changing through an open standards body process, which and undergoing a fairly significant change, which is really dragging out the time cycle on that. We've got to figure out as an EA profession how to fix that part of the problem. On top of that, the part of enterprise architecture that's often considered the most innovative and the part that's most used significantly in digital transformation is business architecture. And the leading thinkers in business architecture are doing everything they can right now to distance themselves from EA. And I think you may have heard some of that in some of Jason's words as well, where he talked about the Center of Digital Enablement. Jason's recommendation there is all because we can't figure this out. We're making such a bad name for ourselves as an EA profession that people have to distance themselves from enterprise architecture to be able to get done what they want to get done. I believe we have to come together as a profession. We have to mature. We have to evolve. We have to stop fighting and start getting better. And we have to change faster than once every 7 years. Now, how do we get it right? In an era of digital transformation, how do we restart EA and get it right? Well, we do that very simply by focusing on people, process, and technology. Okay? So when we talk about people, we need new models for learning. We need certifications, we need training, but it's not enough to be certified. We have to mentor, we have to coach, we have to give people practical experience with that kind of guidance that they need along the way. Without this, our people will not get better. But this can and has been done. In fact, at CCNC, where I work, we offer a full suite of enterprise architecture training, including certifications from introduction to advanced. We also have both an individual and an organizational coaching program that we offer, and we're working to develop an enterprise architecture apprenticeship program to help people really grow and develop. Every single piece of this 70-20-10 model. The 70-20-10 learning model, by the way, if you aren't familiar with it, is an industry-leading thought model for learning and development coming out of the HR industry. So this is not an EA thing. It's not a CC&C thing. This is an industry-leading learning and development model that's been proven over time. But we have to look beyond just giving people a training class and sticking them in a role and expecting them to be great as an enterprise architect. We have to give them the other pieces. In addition to that, we also, I'll add before I go on to the next stage, we also have to think about our people more broadly when it comes to enterprise architecture. We need to think about diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of gender. We have to bring more women into the industry. We have to bring people that are coming out of something other than an IT background into the EA role. We have to do a better job of helping build up different kinds of people into these roles if we're really going to be effective as well. Now, what about EA processes? How do we get those right? Well, we have to start by understanding that one size does not fit all. The most commonly used process, so to speak, for EA, the TOGAF architecture development method, was not designed, and that, if you're not familiar with that, that's the crop circle on the left, was not designed or intended to be used out of the box. It was supposed to be tailored to fit the needs of each company. It's supposed to evolve and grow to meet the needs of as a company matures. So what happens is so many people look at TOGAF and assume it's supposed to be used out of the box, but without that practical experience, you don't really know what works and what doesn't. When we do EA startups here at CC&C, we always start with the business questions first. The business questions an organization is trying to answer, and the business outcomes that they're after with IT. And we first tailor TOGAF to fit those questions and outcomes, and second, we help them develop a growth plan for an organization. Going through this process helps ensure that your enterprise architecture team will continue to add value over the long term. The picture over on the right is just an example of one of the ways that we have in the past found we could modify TOGAF in a way that made sense for a particular situation, particular use case. Now, the last thing, and I know we're running out of time for questions, but I'll hit on this very quickly. In order to get this right, we can get it right because we have better tools. So we said people, process, and tools. The tools aspect, if you look at this, we got a Magic Quadrant from 10, 11 years ago and a Magic Quadrant fairly recent. And what you'll see is that there's only 3 vendors that were on both quadrants, and the vendors that are there have dramatically improved in their perspective in the Magic Quadrant. Those vendors are being pushed by new vendors all the time that are bringing constant improvement and innovation to the marketplace. So that's helping elevate what is possible as an enterprise architecture practice. Having new technology, new tools that we can bring to bear can only benefit us if we use it effectively. Now, one of the things that a lot of companies do when they buy an EA tool is they start up their EA program and they never change the tool. But when you start, if you remember that maturity model, you're down at the solution architecture IT or enterprise solution architecture level. You have one set of needs for a tool. As your organization matures and grows, the needs you have are going to be different. So you either need to change the tool that you have, or you need to consider purchasing a new tool and migrating into a new tool as your organization evolves and grows. A tool that can support that. Otherwise, what you're doing, if you're buying for that end state, you're basically pre-buying capability that you aren't going to be able to use for a period of time. So it's important to have a plan on how you're going to evolve your organization and how you're going to evolve the tools that are going to support your EA organization. So real quickly, and I know we're hitting our time, what's the value of enterprise architecture in a digital world? We bring a big picture role to the table. This is key to help us deliver successfully the digital transformations. We bring proven transformation techniques. We've been doing this for years and years and years on internal processes. Those techniques will work with customer-facing processes as well. And we bring that perspective of what's externally possible. And those are all 3 critical value adds that are unique to what enterprise architecture roles bring to the table. digital transformation needs us to do this to be effective. Now, I'll close with not us, then who? If not now, then when? Are we ready to be what our organizations need to be, the leaders of the digital transformations that need to happen for organizations to continue to grow and exist going forward? There is no one else in the organizations better equipped than enterprise architecture. So we need to stand up and we need to take the bull by the horns, and we need to make that happen. CC&C is, as mentioned, a training and consulting company who is here to help. If you have needs in trying to start up or restart an enterprise architecture program or rethink EA in the context of digital transformation, please feel free to reach out to us. My contact information is available on screen and will be also a part of the webinar. And if we've got any questions, looks like the only question we had on the slide on the question panel was the email to get the slides. As you can see here on screen, the email is restart@intellx.com. And I will open it up. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask verbally, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself now. I'm going to unmute everybody. If anyone has any questions, if not, thank you for your time.
That's all right. Consultant.
Are there any questions for Jason or I?
I have a question. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we have seen over past from an EA standpoint is that it's usually very disjointed from the overall delivery of, whether it's digital or enterprise processes or so specifically in terms of an IT delivery, and the EA is usually very disjointed, and as you indicated in your slide pack, it's more about partnership rather than being gatekeepers. But how do we really ensure and how do we enforce a greater collaboration so that EA doesn't really is truly becomes more like a partner and really helps a delivery acceleration as well?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that and then give Jason a chance to respond as well. I think the biggest thing when you're talking about collaboration, I think as enterprise architects, first and foremost, we need to have the right organizational support. I think that's critical. You need to have the support of your CIO. If you're not yet mature into really doing a lot of the business architecture, you need to have the support of your IT leadership team. You need to have the support of your business leadership team and your CEO if you're a completely mature EA practice. So I think that's the first piece. The other thing is, it's the soft skills, right? If you are, you can't enforce or force people to collaborate. Collaboration has to be done, something that really is worked on over time through softer skills. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be the one to reach out and to prompt the conversation. You have to be the one that's active on the internal social collaboration side if your organization has one of those. You have to make yourself available to people to where they don't feel scared to come ask you questions. So there's a lot of things like that, and it's still going to be really hard work given the fact that we all have too many things to do and not enough time to do it. So Jason, a comment?
Yeah, I would second that, especially in the context of digital transformation. A very common pattern is for the EA group to be part of the IT organization, but digital efforts are not necessarily driven out of IT at all, right? They're often driven out of marketing or out of a separate group, digital group. They may be led by a chief digital officer or the VP of Interactive. It could be any number of different roles, but they're outside of IT, and it's part of this shadow IT challenge where a lot of the technology decisions are now driven outside of the IT organization. But if you're stuck in the IT organization as an EA, then do what Mike is suggesting. You reach out. to those digital folks. Reach out to your marketing people. Reach out to your customer experience people, your interactive people, whoever, depending upon what your organization does. It could be a number of different roles. But your chief digital officer may not even know what an EA is and what an EA can do for them. Right. So how are they going to know unless you tell them? And you can't go to them and say, well, this is EA, TOGAF, blah blah blah, and show a bunch of boxes and lines. They're not going to understand the value, right? It's putting yourself into their shoes and understanding how your expertise and capabilities as an individual as well as the EA team can bring value to what they're trying to do from their perspective. And so it involves a shift in perspective. It involves a level of empathy, right? Understanding their problems from their point of view, and then reaching out, as Mike said, reach out, free yourself from the bounds of traditional organizational constraints, who you're reporting to and where you fit, where your team is located, and just take initiative. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody might scratch their head and wonder what you're doing. There's very little downside.
Yeah, to Jason's point and what he talked about earlier, and the idea of this concept of self-organizing. Stick your hand up and volunteer, or don't even volunteer. Just go do. Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, right? As the old saying goes. I think that's true here too. A lot of times people don't know how you can help them, and so just sticking your hand up, getting engaged, and offering to help is a great way to get the conversation moving. And once you help them once and they see what benefit it has for them, they'll come back to you the second time.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Thanks for the question. It was great. All right. If there are no other questions, then thank you everyone for joining. I know we've had a couple people drop off, but thanks for joining us for this webinar. As mentioned, restart at intelex.com if you want to get the slide deck. We'll also have the video posted on YouTube. And if you want to connect, Jason's information was in the slides earlier. My information's on screen. Feel free to connect either one of us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.